There is a strange, quiet kind of pain in this world, a pain carried by people who smile just enough, who say they're fine just convincingly enough, who live every day as if nothing inside them has ever cracked. They don't look broken. They don't look exhausted. They don't look like they're one heavy thought away from collapsing. But that's the thing about people who hide their pain. They've trained themselves to disappear behind their own composure. They're the people who learned early on that the world doesn't slow down for their wounds. So instead of asking for help, they learned how to build a mask that never slips. It's not a fake mask. It's a protective one, a survival mechanism forged in silence. People think these individuals are strong. And yes, there is strength in them, more than most will ever understand. But that strength was never born from peace. It was born from necessity. Somewhere, long before they started hiding their hurt, they were taught that showing pain was dangerous, or inconvenient, or unwelcome, or simply too much for others to handle. Maybe someone laughed at their vulnerability. Maybe someone ignored their cry for help. Maybe someone turned their suffering into an inconvenience. Or maybe no one noticed at all. So they adapted. They learned how to suffer quietly, how to hold everything together in public, how to break only in places where no one could see. These people become experts at emotional camouflage. They can laugh while their heart is shaking. They can nod while their world is falling apart. They can say, "Don't worry, I'm okay," even when the words taste like lies. And the scariest part, most people believe them, because they've become too good at hiding the truth. They carry themselves with a calm that feels intentional, measured, controlled. But control is often the last weapon of someone who feels like chaos is always waiting beneath their skin. Their psychology is full of paradoxes. They crave connection, yet fear being truly seen. They want someone to notice their struggle, yet they push everyone away when someone gets too close. They long to be understood, yet they hide their true feelings so carefully that understanding them becomes almost impossible. They are people who feel deeply, far more deeply than they ever admit, but they tuck every emotion into a quiet corner, because they don't want to lose anyone by being too emotional. They don't want to cause problems. They don't want to appear weak. So they smile, they act, they function, and they hope that maybe, just maybe, the world won't notice the trembling beneath the surface. But on the inside, they're carrying storms that have never had a chance to break. And the longer you hide a storm, the more violently it grows. These are the people who suffer in silence, not because they want to, but because they don't know any other way to exist. People who hide their brokenness live with a quiet contradiction. They desperately want someone to understand them, yet they've spent so many years pretending to be okay that now they don't know how to be understood. It's like this. They want help, but they don't want to ask. They need comfort, but they don't want to be a burden. They crave closeness, but they fear what someone might see if the mask ever slips. This internal battle shapes their entire emotional world. They become hyper-aware, hyper-observant, hyper-responsible. They notice every shift in tone, every quiet detail, every subtle change in energy. Because for them, emotional awareness became a survival skill. If they could sense danger early, they could protect themselves. If they could read a room, they could adjust their behavior. If they could predict disappointment, they could emotionally prepare. This is why people who hide their pain often become the psychologists of their friend groups. They understand others better than they understand themselves. They give advice. They offer support. They listen. They comfort. But their own heart remains untouched, unspoken, unseen. Not because nobody cares, but because these people never learned how to let anyone in. They're the ones who apologize too quickly, who try to fix every problem, who say it's okay before they even think about how they actually feel. Because in their mind, causing conflict is worse than suffering quietly. And when you ask them what's wrong, they'll smile softly, look away, say, "Really, I'm fine." And you'll believe them because they sound so convincing. But inside, their thoughts unravel like threads. They replay every mistake, every fear, Every battle they fought alone. They relive memories that still ache. They carry guilt that isn't theirs. They hold on to expectations they can never meet. They feel broken, not in the dramatic, cinematic sense, but in the quiet, invisible way that makes life feel heavier than it should. And they hide it because they've learned that people don't stay when things get complicated. They hide it because they've been let down before. They hide it because the last time they opened up, someone used their vulnerability against them. So now, their survival depends on subtlety, on silence, on endurance. Psychologically, these individuals develop what's called emotional minimalism, a habit of shrinking their needs until they barely feel them. They convince themselves they don't need help, don't need comfort, don't need anyone. But that's not true. They need connection more deeply than most. They love fiercely. They feel intensely, but they express quietly. And that quietness becomes their prison. At night, when the world goes still, they finally collapse into the version of themselves no one sees. The version that trembles, overthinks, and wishes someone would notice without having to be told. Because deep down, they want one thing more than anything: to be understood without having to perform strength first. But when you hide your pain for too long, the world forgets you can hurt at all. There's something almost paradoxical about people who hide their brokenness. They carry emotional wounds that would crumble most people. Yet they move through the world quietly, gently, almost gracefully. They've learned to suffer in silence. They've learned to smile through the ache. They've learned to function while falling apart. Not because they're strong, but because they were never given another option. Let's talk about the functional brokenness these people embody. From the outside, they look put together. They show up on time. They help others. They keep their promises. They stay calm. They handle responsibilities. But this functionality isn't peace. It's autopilot. Inside, they're exhausted, drained, emotionally threadbare. But they keep going because stopping feels dangerous. Stillness feels like collapse. Rest feels like falling apart. That's the thing most people don't understand. People who hide their pain don't fear breaking. They fear being seen breaking. Because being seen means being questioned. Being questioned means explaining. Explaining means reliving. And reliving means reopening wounds they barely survived the first time. So instead, they bury everything deeper. Psychologists call this emotional suppression, but it's more than that. It's a strategy, a shield, a language they learned long before adulthood. Growing up, their emotions were either dismissed, mocked, punished, or ignored. They learned quickly that vulnerability wasn't safe, that crying made things worse, that expressing needs led to disappointment, that being honest became ammunition for someone else later. So they adapted. They became the peacemakers, the fixers, the self-reliant ones, the ones who never asked for anything. And this adaptation follows them into adulthood in symptoms they barely recognize. Laughing things off that actually hurt, shutting down when someone gets too close, minimizing their emotions to make others comfortable, overthinking their every word, bottling up anything that feels too heavy, saying I don't want to bother you even when they're drowning, being overly forgiving even when deeply hurt, feeling guilty for needing basic human support. These patterns aren't random. They're protective reflexes. Their nervous system learned that the safest place to store pain was inside themselves. But here's the real tragedy. People who feel broken but hide it often appear fine for too long. So nobody notices the signs. Nobody notices how they hesitate before admitting they're tired. Nobody notices the trembling in their voice disguised as laughter. Nobody notices the way they go quiet when something wounds them. Nobody notices the subtle withdrawal behind their smile. Nobody notices how much effort it takes for them to say, "I'm okay." And because nobody sees it, nobody asks. Nobody checks in. Nobody offers help, which only reinforces the belief they've carried for years. No one will be there for me, so I have to handle this alone. That belief becomes their anchor, their curse, their identity. Even love can feel overwhelming to them. When someone finally shows genuine care, not surface level concern, but deep patience, consistent care. It shakes them because they don't know what to do with softness. They don't know how to receive help without apologizing. They don't know how to trust someone's presence. They don't know how to believe someone won't leave once their broken parts are revealed. So they pull back. They say, "I'm fine, really." They build distance just as someone gets close. It's not rejection, it's fear. Fear of being truly seen. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of being too much. Fear of being not enough. Fear of letting someone in only for them to walk away like others did. People who feel broken don't hide their pain because they lack courage. They hide it because they've been hurt in the exact moments they tried to be honest. And the body remembers betrayal long after the mind tries to forget. There's a moment quiet, almost imperceptible, when a person who hides their pain realizes they can't keep carrying everything alone. But instead of reaching out, they retreat even deeper into themselves. Why? Because breaking in private feels safer than risking being misunderstood in public. People who feel broken but don't show it exist in a strange emotional paradox. They desperately wish someone would notice their silent suffering, yet they panic at the thought of someone looking too closely. That's the internal war they live with every day. They want connection, but they fear exposure. They want comfort, but they fear dependence. They want support, but they fear burdening others. They want to be loved, but they fear not being worth loving. So they build a life around controlled vulnerability, a life where they appear open enough to seem normal, but guarded enough to stay untouchable. And the world can't tell the difference. From the outside, they look calm, stable, grounded, unshakable, but inside, it feels like standing on cracked glass. Every smile is a rehearsal. Every conversation is a performance. Every "I'm fine" is a carefully rehearsed line they've mastered over years of practice. Here's something most people never realize. People who hide their brokenness often overfunction in other areas of life. They work hard. They help others. They hold everything together. They become the person everyone relies on. But this reliability isn't strength. It's a distraction. As long as they're busy fixing everyone else's problems, they don't have to face their own. This is why they become the one who always listens, the one who never complains, the one who gives great advice, the one who shows up no matter what, the one who apologizes first, the one who forgives too easily, the one who stays quiet when they're hurting, the one who pretends nothing affects them. They've spent their entire lives being the emotional anchor for everyone around them, yet nobody ever asks where their anchor is. And the saddest part, they don't expect one, because somewhere along the way, they learned a painful truth. If you break in front of people, you risk being abandoned by them. So they learn to hold everything together, even when it feels like they're falling apart inside. And here's something even more heartbreaking. They rarely let themselves cry. Tears feel dangerous. Tears feel messy. Tears feel like the dam might burst and never stop. So instead of breaking open, they break inward. Quietly, secretly, silently. Sometimes the only place they allow themselves to feel anything is alone. In the shower, in the car, late at night when no one will hear, or in the quiet moments between exhaustion and sleep. Because even their pain has to follow rules. But here's the paradox that defines them. Their emotional numbness isn't emptiness, it's overload. Their silence isn't peace, it's suppression. Their stillness isn't strength, it's survival. They're not cold, they're not unemotional, they're not detached, they're overwhelmed. They've felt so deeply, for so long, with so little support, that their body had to protect itself the only way it knew how, by shutting down feelings before they could spiral. It's not that they don't feel, it's that they feel too much and show none of it. They're not broken, they're overloaded, overwhelmed, overconditioned to stay silent. And yet, beneath that silence, something powerful still lives. A longing to be understood without having to explain. A desire to be comforted without having to ask. A wish for someone to see past the mask and say, "I know you're hurting. You don't have to hide it with me." Because that, more than anything, is what they've been waiting for. Even if they'll never admit it out loud. Here's the part almost nobody sees. People who feel broken but hide it aren't trying to be mysterious. They're trying to be functional. They don't want special treatment. They don't want pity. They don't want the world to rearrange itself around their wounds. They just want to move through life without their pain spilling everywhere. Because deep down, they fear that if people knew the truth, the confusion, the heaviness, the numbness, the exhaustion, they'd be seen as fragile, dramatic, or too much to handle. So they convince themselves that silence is strength, that composure is maturity, that self-containment is responsibility. But the reality is much simpler. They hide their pain because they think it makes them easier to love. And nothing breaks a person more quietly than that. The hardest part is that this emotional suppression becomes so automatic, they don't even realize they're doing it. They don't ask for help because they've learned not to need it. They don't open up because vulnerability has punished them before. They don't set boundaries because they're used to being the one who absorbs everything. So they keep carrying it all, alone, invisible, silent. And over time, something begins to happen internally. Their emotional world starts to dim, not because they've stopped caring, but because they've reached capacity. When you feel everything and show nothing, your mind eventually learns to shut down as a form of protection. That's why they seem calm. That's why they seem composed. That's why nothing seems to faze them. They're not unaffected. They're overloaded. Their numbness is a scar, a quiet one, a deep one, a survival one. But here's the truth no one tells them. You don't heal by pretending you're fine. You heal by allowing yourself to be human again. People who hide their pain often think they need someone extraordinary to help them, someone who can read them, understand them, fix them without being asked. But healing rarely comes from a savior. It comes from safety, from being around someone who doesn't rush you, doesn't pry, doesn't demand your skeleton keys, but simply stays close enough for you to breathe again. Healing happens when someone says, I don't need you to be strong right now. You don't have to pretend with me. You're allowed to feel everything you've buried. People who seem unbreakable are often waiting for permission to lay down the weight. And here's the paradox. The moment they finally open up, even just a little, they don't crumble. They don't fall apart. They don't become weak. They exhale. For the first time in years. Because brokenness isn't what destroys people. Isolation does. And the ones who've carried their silence the longest are often the ones who deserve gentleness the most. So if you know someone like this, someone who always seems strong, always smiles, always helps, never burdens, never asks, don't push them to open up. Just make it safe for them to stop hiding. Because behind the quiet eyes, the steady voice, and the calm demeanor is someone who has felt more than they allow the world to see. Someone who isn't fragile, just tired. Someone who isn't cold, just guarded. Someone who isn't empty, just overflowing. Someone who isn't broken, just healing in silence. And maybe, just maybe, all they've needed is a moment where they don't have to hide anymore. A place where their pain can rest. A person who can see the cracks without fear. A reminder that broken doesn't mean unlovable. It just means human. And being human is nothing to hide.